wondered what's going on inside your head? Why you think, feel, or act the way you do? Then you're in the right place. Today, we're diving into the powerhouse that makes us who we are, the human brain. And let me tell you, this thing is wild. We're talking about 86 billion neurons, trillions of connections, and enough complexity to even make the smartest scientists scratch their heads. But before we get into all the fancy neuroscience terms, let's start simple. What actually is the brain, and how does it work? Your brain is divided into different parts, each with its own superpower. The frontal lobe, that's your decision maker, responsible for things like planning, problem solving, and yes, the voice in your head that says, should I eat another cookie? It's also where personality and impulse control live. Ever wonder why little kids blurt out the most unfiltered thoughts? That's because their frontal lobe is still developing. In fact, it doesn't fully mature until about age 25 for men and age 23 for women. Then there's the temporal lobe. This one's a multitasker. It helps you remember song lyrics, recognize faces, and understand language. It's also deeply tied to emotions because it houses part of the limbic system, which we'll get to in another episode. For now, let's talk about the occipital lobe, your brain's very own movie projector. This is where visual information gets processed. Everything you see, your occipital lobe is decoding that light into images. Without it, the world would be just darkness. And finally, we have the parietal lobe, which is responsible for touch, spatial awareness, and movement. It helps you navigate through a crowded room, feel the softness of a blanket, or react when something unexpectedly touches your arm. Now that we know the major parts of the brain, let's talk about how it actually works. Your brain is basically a giant network of neurons, tiny cells that send electrical and chemical signals to communicate. Imagine them as little messengers running all over the place, delivering important information. Every time you think, move, or even feel an emotion, your neurons are working overtime. And get this, your brain generates enough electrical energy to power a small light bulb. If neurons are messengers, neurotransmitters are the letters they send. These chemicals control everything, from mood to memory, even motivation. I will now discuss the different chemicals that can be outbursted by these neurons using neurotransmitters. First, we have dopamine, the feel-good chemical. It's responsible for pleasure and motivation. Ever finish a big task and feel amazing? That's dopamine at work. Then we have serotonin, the mood stabilizer. Low levels of serotonin are usually linked to depression and anxiety, which we will also discuss in another episode. We also have glutamate, the brain's main go signal. It's what helps neurons communicate effectively. I actually struggle with anxiety and depression, so I know firsthand how real these chemical shifts can feel. It's not just in your head, it's literally your brain chemistry at work. And that's why understanding the brain matters. When you know what's going on up there, you can start to figure out how to work with it instead of against it. Here's something mind blowing. Your brain isn't fixed. It rewires itself all the time. This is called neuroplasticity, and it's one of the coolest things about the brain. Every time you learn something new, your neurons create stronger pathways. That means practicing skills, reading, or even watching this video is actually physically changing your brain. Wild, right? But it works both ways. If you reinforce negative thoughts or bad habits, those pathways can get stronger too. That's why it can be hard to break a habit, but also why it's very possible to change. Most of what happens in our brain, it happens without us even realizing it. Scientists say about 95% of our behavior is controlled by the subconscious mind. This means a lot of our reactions, habits, and even fears come from experiences we might not even remember clearly. Ever had a gut feeling about something? That's your subconscious at work. This is also why trauma, childhood experiences, and emotional patterns usually shape who we become. Your temporal lobe, specifically the limbic system, stores memories and emotional responses, often guiding decisions without you even realizing it. So let's recap. The brain is made up of different lobes, billions of neurons, and powerful chemical signals that shape how we think, feel, and act. And the best part, it's always changing. You're not stuck. Your brain can grow, heal, and adapt just like you. So now that you know the basics, let's dig deeper. Next up, we're talking about how the brain changes over time from childhood to adulthood. And spoiler alert, your teenage brain is chaos. See you in the next episode.